Hey everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today we are going to go over another grammar pattern, and the one that we have in store for today is the grammar pattern that is using she. So this grammar pattern is definitely going to need to be a two-parter at the very least because it hits like all three notes for grammar patterns that are pretty darn hard to understand from non-native speakers' point of views because it's used mostly in casual speech. It's kind of uniquely Japanese in that there's no English equivalent and it has multiple uses. So if we were to say what it generally is used for, the she grammar pattern is basically used to list things or to provide reasons for something or sometimes to contrast. So she can be used with all types of words, basically the three main types of words. You can use it with adjectives or nouns or verbs, and if you're using it to like make a list and you're using multiple words with it, you can use those type of words interchangeably. So you can have an adjective and a noun and a verb, etc. And so the basic construction here is we're just going to take a word and we're going to take the plain form of that word. If it's a verb, then just a plain form of a verb. If it's an e-adjective, just the e-adjective, itself basically, that's the plain form. And if it's a noun or a na-adjective, we just use the noun or the na-adjective plus the copula da. So verb in its plain form she, e-adjective in its plain form she, noun or na-adjective in its plain form plus da plus she. So like I already said, this grammar pattern she is kind of a colloquial grammar pattern in that it's used a lot more in spoken Japanese than it is in written Japanese. And this is reflected in the kind of verbal nuances that it has, and it's kind of hard to explain them. So as we go through the examples that we pretty much have in store for this lesson, we'll try to take the time to point out the verbal nuances that show up. Okay, so using she to use basically its most common function, forming a list basically. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna plug in that character she right after every entry in our list except for the last one. And even though this grammar pattern is used to establish what we're calling a list here, sometimes when we use it, we'll only have a list of like one or two things. But here's the first nuance that we're going to point out with this grammar pattern is that when you use she, it basically implies that there's something more beyond what you said. As in, the list goes on. It's similar to the particle toka, which also kind of implies the indefinite ending. So basically we'll say like an adjective she, then we just end it with that, but it implies that, you know, there's other adjectives that can describe what we're trying to describe. And this is gonna kind of reflect the verbal nuance here because in a sense you can kind of think of it like you say one thing, one fact about something, and then you pile on another fact or detail about it as like an afterthought because that's commonly how spoken language works. You say something and it makes you go, oh, this too, and this as well. You wouldn't really see that in written language because written language is a lot more organized and preemptive, I guess I would say. So enough of the contextual overload here. Let's just jump into an example to see what we're talking about. For our first example, we'll do something like 彼女は可愛いし、性格も明るい. And so this line right here is going to translate to something like she's cute and she's also got a bright personality. So let's do a quick rundown of everything going on here. We have 彼女, which means she. We have the topic marker wa, we have the word kawaii. This is an e-adjective that means cute, so we're going to be using this with the grammar pattern, so we just plug in she right after it because with an e-adjective, the plain form is just the word itself. Then after that we have seikaku, which is the word basically for personality. We have the particle mo to mean basically also. Then we have the e-adjective akarui, which means bright, so personality is bright as well. 彼女は可愛いし、性格も明るい is going to mean she's cute and she's also got a bright personality. And so what the grammar pattern is allowing us to do here when we're using it is we're being able to list multiple things about her, but also with the nuance of the grammar pattern, it implies that there's also other stuff that's good about her that I didn't state, and the list just goes on basically indefinitely. And so as you might have been wondering going through that example, you might have been going, hey, what's the difference between this and just using basically the te form, which is like the connective form? So we could have just said like cute and bright personality, and it would have been the same thing, no? Well, no, it wouldn't have because of what I just said. The nuance here is that the descriptions that are complimenting her, there's more to it than just the ones that I stated. If we had used the te form, it wouldn't have meant that. It just would have been like bluntly this and this, cute and bright personality, as well as the te form also has multiple functions. So sometimes, depending on the context, you can confuse it with not meaning anything similar to saying multiple things about someone. It could sometimes imply like a sequential relationship or something like that. So with the she grammar pattern, there's no implication of stuff like that, just that the list goes on. And having said that, we're going to point something else here now. When you see the grammar pattern she translated into English, probably the most common translation will just be like the simple and, right? Which again makes it similar to te, but like I just said, it's not exactly the same. But probably the best way to translate the she grammar pattern is not to and, but to the phrasing of not only but also, because this phrasing / wording here is going to give that implication of the thing going on. There's other things that describe her that I haven't stated, but there's also some other thing. And in accordance with that, when we're using this in Japanese, there are certain like particles or phrases that we use with this grammar pattern commonly that also imply this kind of like also definition, such as the mo particle that we just used in the example. We said seikaku mo akarui. It's basically saying, and also her personality is bright, as opposed to just saying, and her personality is bright. So again, that verbal nuance right there of like an afterthought. I said this, but oh, also this thing as well, and then there are other things as well. So yeah, the wording of not only but also is probably the best go-to translation for this grammar pattern if you're trying to make sense of what it's saying. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna go through two more examples that are kind of fitting of this easy translation of not only but also, and then after that we'll go into two other kind of more specific nuances that she can be used to mean. So for our next example sentence, we'll have the simple line of 昨日は図書館にいたし郵便記憶もいた. And so this line right here is going to translate to basically, yesterday I went to the library and the post office. Or if we wanted to better match the nuance of the Japanese grammar pattern she to mean also, we could say I went to the library and also the post office. So as you can see here, we're using this grammar pattern now with verbs as opposed to adjectives. It doesn't really make it any more difficult, so let's go into the sentence and break it down to see how it's working here. First up, we have the word kino, which means, of course, yesterday. We're going to be marking yesterday as the topic, so we just have the wa right there, kino wa. And we are now going to state a destination, which is going to be toshokan, which means library. We're going to need to mark the location with a basically a destination marker, so ni. Then we're going to use our verb iku, which means to go. It's the very common standard verb to mean to go. So toshokan ni ita is going to be iku in its past plain forms, and we can use that with the grammar pattern because it's still a plain form. So we're going to do exactly that, just plug in shi right after ita. So kino wa toshokan ni ita shi is going to mean I went to the library yesterday, but it's also going to imply some other things because we're using the grammar pattern she, and that of course implies more things. So we're going to continue the sentence and of course just say yubin kyoku mo ita. And yubin kyoku is going to be the post office, so that's just going to mean also went to the post office. And you can see again, we're using the particle mo here as opposed to just using like wa or something, because the she grammar pattern has that implication of also this. And so we use the wording or particles that are more in accordance with that. Okay, but that example sentence was a little too easy because we just used the word iku, which means to go, twice. Let's mix it up and use different verbs. So let's do another example sentence, and we have something like 日本では買い物をしたし、たくさんの和食も食べた. And this sentence is going to translate to basically, in Japan, we went shopping and we also ate a lot of Japanese style cuisine. So breaking this down, first up we just have Nihon, which is the word for Japan, of course. We have the combination of the particles de and wa to mark the location as the topic, basically. We have the verbal noun kaimono suru, which means shopping, basically, to go shopping. But we conjugate suru into its past plain form because we did this in the past, so it turns into shita, and then this is the plain form still. So we can just plug in shi again. Just like the previous example. So, 日本では買い物したし is going to translate to in Japan, we went shopping. And then also, of course, there's this implication of some more stuff that we're about to cover. And that is going to be たくさんの和食も食べた. And so, たくさん just means a lot. It's being used in a noun of a noun modification basically here with 和食, which means Japanese food or Japanese style food cuisine. So たくさんの和食 is going to be a lot of Japanese food. We're going to mark that as the direct object, so we'll just plug in the O there, the direct object marker, Then we have our verb taberu, which means to eat. We also need this to be in the past form because we're talking in the past here. So taberu turns into tabeta, and that's the end of the sentence. 日本では買い物したし、たくさんの和食も食べた. In Japan, we went shopping and we also ate a lot of Japanese style food. Now we're going to cover two other specific kind of functions that this grammar pattern she is used for. The first one is going to be the least common of them all. It's kind of pretty darn rare to be honest, but the second one is going to be pretty much just as common as using she to list things such as descriptors or whatever. We're going to quickly cover the less common one first. Then for the next sizable chunk of this lesson, we'll put that into the part 2. So the grammar pattern she can also be used to contrast things, and this is pretty rare but it still exists, so of course we'll cover it. And let's just jump into an example sense to get a feel of how that works. So our line will be 試験を取るかもしれないし This will translate into English quite simply as I may or may not take the exam or test. Let's look at the sentence here. We have it starting with the word shiken, which just translates to test or exam. We're marking it with the direct object marker O because it's a direct object to the action, which is the verb toru, which means to take. So to take a test or take an exam. Now toru is going to in turn being used with the kamoshirenai grammar pattern, which just basically translates to might do that verb. So toru kamoshirenai is going to be might take as opposed to just to take. Now we're in turn going to use that with the grammar pattern shi here. And because it's in its negative nai form, kamoshirenai, that's a plain form still, so we can't just plug in shi right after it. So toru kamoshirenai shi is, we can't really translate it to anything that makes it different from just toru kamoshirenai by itself until we see the rest of the sentence, which is toru in its negative nai form, toranai plus kamoshirenai, which would then mean might not take since it's in its negative form now. And so with that, we can conclude that the shi grammar pattern here is being used for its contrasting function. So we can just conclude that this is a simple contrast that will translate to I may or may not take the exam. Let's do another example of contrasting with she with a sentence that is of kind of a different structure essentially. So for example, the sentence will have something like 今日だけ限定のクレープが買えるし、たくさん宿題があるし、本当に困った. So this line right here is going to translate to basically today is the only day when the limited edition crepe flavor is available, and I also have a lot of homework to do. I'm like really conflicted, or what am I gonna do? So this in a sense is using she as kind of both listing things and to contrast, because we are kind of listing two situations that are true. We're saying that today is the only day where it's available, as well as the fact that I have a lot of homework to do. But the two things are kind of on the polar opposite sides of the spectrum, right? Because one is like a thing that I want to do, and the other thing is something that I don't really want to do, and they are like conflicting towards each other. Breaking down the sentence, we start with kyo, which means today. We have dake, which means only, so kyo dake is just today or only today. We have a noun of a noun modification with gente no crepe. Gente means basically limited edition. We have the no particle there to instigate the noun of a noun modification, and crepe is just the katakana word for crepe basically. So gente no crepe is limited edition crepe. We have the particle ga because we're going to be using the potential form of a verb here, kaeru, which means to be able to buy. It's the verb kao, which means to buy in its potential form. And the potential form is in fact a plain form. So we can use the she with this word, and that's what we do. We plug in she after. So kaeru shi is be able to buy with the nuance of listing things basically because of the she there. As we move on to the rest of the sentence, we see that it's also kind of being used to contrast because our other situation or fact is たくさん宿題がある. たくさん of course means a lot, 宿題 means homework, and the がある just means there is or there are. After ある we also have she because it is possible to put the she after like the last thing that you state. This last thing here isn't necessarily the end of the sentence though either, so we end it with 本当に困った, and this is kind of just saying I'm really in trouble or I'm conflicted or I don't know what to do, and that's kind of indicative of verbal speech there. You wouldn't really say that in a written sentence. And so yeah, in that example sense, you're kind of listing things, but you're also listing things that are of different, they kind of negate each other. They're not just the same. A lot of adjectives that you use to say a good thing, it can be a good thing and a bad thing. Okay, so that's where we'll stop with the contrasting function of she. The next one is going to be another common usage of she, and that's to provide reason. This is alongside the listing things. This is the other very common thing, and we're going to have to cover a lot. So we will continue this coverage of she in part 2. Okay, so that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed your time doing so. If you'd like to express that, you can like the video, leave a comment below, or subscribe if you haven't already. If you'd like to support more of these video lessons, please do consider checking out our Patreon page. Also included on the screen right now are, of course, a bunch of links on where to find and follow us elsewhere online. Lastly, check out our Discord server. We've got a community of hundreds of, so if you're looking for somebody to voice chat with just to practice speaking Japanese, or if you just want to talk about anime or music or manga. And with that, see you next time.